All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another fantastic episode of Reactionary Opinions. D-Dog's here. What's up, D-Dog?
Oh, just enjoying my evening. Ate a nice burger like a good American and a little bit of South Africa, drinking tea. So I'm doing well.
Better be Rooibos.
Unfortunately not.
I
wish it was now.
I'm also drinking 5 roses. Don't worry.
Probably Earl Grey, man.
I actually had Earl Grey earlier on. That's very good.
Oh, that's gross. Russell, what's happening, brother?
No, just the usual.
Actual brother, real brother.
Yeah, looking forward to a bit of a open mic chat this evening. But yeah, just had some supper, settled down nicely, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
In your classy old West Coast running shirt over there.
I'm in club colours tonight.
Yeah, representing. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is how the reactionaries keep fit to chase away degeneracy. They even, don't even allow their bodies to degenerate. That right there is a true conservative.
Not even their bodies. That's why I'm running the Cape Town Marathon in September.
Nice. Yeah, and straight after that, he needs to go and have his mind checked because he's bloody crazy. Anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another show. We actually had the last show we had was with Piake Dlamini, the great Zulu ANCAP. That was quite a lot of fun. Again, it's pretty much what we expected to find, that there's very little that we disagree on. This is something myself and Russell were actually on a podcast with Jason Batt on the Conscious Debriefing. Yeah, excellent podcast. Go and check it out, guys. I'll post a link to the podcast and the YouTube channel, Jason Batt's YouTube channel, and all of that. So you guys can go and check it out. But what we actually found, we were on there with Christoph Smuts and Piake, myself and Russell, and obviously Jason. What we really found was that there's very little that us and your sort of anarchists have in, there's very few things that we disagree with, perhaps merely the sort of social aspects and the importance of making sure that we maintain social coherence and that sort of thing, whereas they take a more sort of liberal stance on those sort of policies. But as a whole, I think that we are definitely on the same side, and we definitely believe the same thing. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I think practically speaking, in terms of there's a bit of a worldview difference, but in terms of practical things that we would all like to see achieved in South Africa and other places, there's a lot of common ground to go on.
Yeah, look, the day-to-day stuff, we're pretty much on board, and where we are different, we can at least work out a common ground as well,
Right.
Yeah, totally agree. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, the topic of discussion today is actually something that we got into sort of at the end of the podcast with Jason Batt, and that's the idea or the notion of semigration. In case you don't know what exactly semigration entails, it's basically the sort of migration of people from the cities into your rural, smaller settlements and smaller towns, and to sort of, get away from your day-to-day shit that the city has to offer. A lot of people are doing that. You'll find smaller towns. I'm not talking sort of one-horse towns, but smaller places like along the Garden Route, George, those sort of places are really, George, Mossel Bay, all of those places are really growing at a drastic rate. Even some of the smaller towns in the Eastern Cape are actually seeing a considerable amount of growth, which is sort of contrary to what happens in a centralized society and stuff like South Africa, where the ANC wants everyone in the city. The rural communities are actually growing. Dylan, you made some notes. Do you want to just sort of run us through the first sort of section?
Yeah, sure, man. So the main reason, why I discuss semigration first, the big thing kind of that this all ties into is emigration. So South Africa for a while, and it's really sort of ramped up in recent years, has experienced quite a degree of brain drain. So artisans and professionals have been leaving South Africa for quite a while. One of the reasons for this is economic contraction. So in 1995, right after democracy came to South Africa, the GDP of the country was 61.1% higher than comparative upper middle income countries. In 2017, it was 75% the size. So basically, it's more than 1.5 times the size of comparative peer countries to now it's only 3/4 of the size. So South Africa is being left behind economically while the rest of the world, particularly the developing world, is soldiering on. Between that same time period, South Africa-born residents in high-income countries has more than doubled. So it's gone from a little over 300,000 to now about 750,000 South Africans. And this isn't just, and a lot of the places that people think they go to are places like the US, New Zealand, Australia, which is true. Like I said, now there's about 750,000 South Africans in rich, first world countries, but there's also quite a few who are in middle income countries. So it's not just, trying to, go to the USA or Australia. The amount of people in middle income countries has gone up quite a bit. So in 1995, there were about 40,000 people in middle income countries. And now there's almost 120 or 150, about 115,000. And this was in 2017. And I'm sure the numbers have gone up. Immigration has only increased in that time. Botswana alone has seen an increase of 30,000 South Africans to it. And yeah, the numbers just keep going up and up and up. Part of the reason, there's a whole lot of reasons. The economy is one. There's a poll done by My Broadband in 2019, fairly recently, where 46% of IT professionals surveyed said they were planning on emigrating. And they listed 5 main reasons for this. First reason was political and economic concerns. The second reason was crime. Third was seeking better standards of living. And then the one after that, fifth, was better future for children and concerns about EEE and affirmative action policy that make their professional futures doubtful. So yeah, that's kind of the current state of affairs and reasons for why a lot of people are going. So particularly in urban centers, a lot of the reasons to stay are becoming questionable. And here in Cape Town, it's no surprise that a lot of people are considering that due to a lot of the crime that's sort of gone up, in the past 20 years or so. And it's just becoming more difficult to live. Things are getting more expensive. Incomes aren't keeping up enough. And there's just a lot of instability and anxiety about what the future for the country holds. So, yeah
I think that's very important to speak about the actual problem that we have in South Africa, specifically with regards to your brain drain and that sort of thing. And I think that every single person in South Africa is or knows people that have immigrated, or in my case, I mean, every week I hear of friends and family and stuff that are immigrating and leaving South Africa. So it's a desperate situation because, people are also, educated professionals and stuff is a massive resource that we're losing as a country.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember exactly where I read it, but it's something absurd where like an engineer in South Africa contributes an absurd amount to the local economy for your average person. I think it was something like for every like white collar professional who makes above a certain income, they basically provide employment opportunities to like 5 people or something crazy like that. So with all these people moving, they're taking their money with them, and that's less money to be invested, to be saved, to be spent to local businesses and stuff. And the rest, a lot of these people who were previously relying on their businesses are caught in the lurch.
100%. There's that graph that you put in the notes, the link to the graph where it says high skilled immigration, and the slide to the bottom, done by Enterprise Observatory of South Africa. So I'll put the actual graph now in the video once I've edited it and stuff. But it says it shows the index of South African born stock in high income countries. So generally the South Africans that are immigrating to your sort of high income countries and stuff are a lot of the times going to be your professionals and engineers, because they're in high demand there. And then there's a direct correlation or a negative impact on SA's per capita GDP as a percentage of the average per capita GDP of upper middle income countries. And you can see there's a definite sort of correlation on that sort of thing. It's just anyway. But
yeah, it's very interesting. It's almost like a 1-to-1 thing. Yeah. So as the economy goes down, immigration goes up. It's very
the scale is perfect. The scale it's like a mirror image. It's exactly what it is. It's quite scary, but it's evident. I mean, it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
And of course, with the deteriorating economic conditions comes all sorts of other problems: social unrest, protests, increases in crime, and social alienation.
When the government starts to run more and more deficit spending and that sort of thing, and which it generally is going to end up in inflation. People's welfare checks that they receive are going to be worthless very soon. So just hang on to your heads, folks. That hush money that the government's been paying to the masses is about to become worthless.
Yeah, and where that's particularly dangerous in the long run is going to be in cities. I think there are places that are least equipped to sort of deal with this, not have the community structures, or even on a basic level, just tons of desperate people living around you who all of a sudden don't have any money anymore. Mm-hmm. So being out in the country, it's not looking like such a bad idea, which leads to this concept of semigration.
Dylan gets to make his own Alaska here in South Africa.
Yes.
His own rural Alaska.
Yes. I'll move right.
That was the plan all along, didn't you, Dylan?
Yes.
You and that pesky high IQ of yours.
Yeah. Man. When I left, I took the old high IQ with me. It's terrible. But dropped by 1 point when I left. But this is a phenomenon that we not only see in South Africa. Well, first off, let's talk about semigration. This is basically the concept that a lot of the reasons why people want to leave to another country, a lot of the appealing things that they see in these other places can be found to a certain extent in South Africa, for instance, just not where they're at. And you're actually seeing this trend happen in the United States to a certain extent because cities in a lot of Western countries are becoming increasingly hard to live in for a number of reasons. Costs have gone up, crime's gone up. In Los Angeles, for instance, it's very difficult to afford, certain things and live in a nice area. And in the not nice areas, there's high rates of homelessness, of crime, and it's just a lot of these cities are getting unlivable. And I think fairly recently, New York City just posted its first decline in overall population basically ever. So people are leaving the cities. And I think in South Africa, that's, people are coming in because a lot of them from the country because of the better relative economic opportunities. But a lot of people of means or people who are, even lower middle class or just comfortable sort of blue collar types, a lot of them are leaving the cities for greener pastures, literally.
There's a philosophical argument to be made about it. There's a philosophical discussion that we can have about that, guys, and that's. I'm going to sound a little bit strange over here, but I think part of the reason, or part of the idea, or part of the reason why people are leaving the cities is perhaps they're starting to realize that perhaps there's more to life than the rat race, than the daily grind, than all of this, then sort of building a career and all of that before you get married and all of this sort of nonsense. Perhaps they're starting to realize that, hey, listen, the purpose of life is actually to create life and get married, have a child, start a family, support that family, raise that family, etc., etc., etc. I think that people might be understanding that and realizing that.
No, absolutely. And an interesting little thing, Dylan, added to your semigration situation, notes there. This is going back, I think, to about 2010 or so, 2010, 2011. In South Africa, they rated the best South African cities to live in as a family. All right. None of the major metros came in the first two. Best city to live in for a middle income average family, number one was Bloemfontein. Number one was Bloemfontein. In terms of what you had access to, cost of living, all these sorts of things, they weighed it all up. And on the balance of it was Bloemfontein. Number two was Port Elizabeth. Two of the areas that are shunned generally, it's either Pretoria, Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town. That's it, But those four centers couldn't occupy the top two posts.
So you said, Russell, was that with regards to sort of what quality of living, right?
The best places in terms of being able to earn, being able to own a house, being able to raise a family, send them to school, send them to university, send them, all these little, tick boxes, all these sorts of things. Those were the easiest cities, the two easiest cities for a family to live in.
No, it makes total sense, eh? Just makes sense. One of those things that just make sense.
But it looked, like I say, you mentioned that to people in Cape Town and they almost fall over.
They're like, Bloemfontein.
Yeah.
They'll say Bloemfontein, the cuckest place I've ever been.
It's great.
That's a dad saying that, eh?
Yeah, pretty much. I actually lived in Bloem for about 3 months. It's an absolute shithole.
It's not what he means by that. It's not that that there's sewage in the streets or anything like that.
No. It's very clean, neat, tidy, and stuff. But okay, I'm gonna sound a bit controversial again. It's a bit too Afrikaans for me.
Okay.
It's a bit of a hard place, But Port Elizabeth, that's a second best after that, which is just as pretty good.
Yeah, PE is great. PE is absolutely fantastic. They have their cost of living is very low. Their salaries are on a par with Cape Townian salaries and that sort of thing. So
their cost of living is about 20 to 30% cheaper,
if not more. Yeah.
Yeah, and they earn the same as Cape Town people.
Yeah, so they live like kings in the Eastern Cape there. And let me tell you, Dylan, you've never been to PE, have you?
I never been out of the Western Cape except for Joburg.
Terrible. We need to take you on a road trip, my friend.
I think that round trip through the Karoo, through Craddock, Craft,
That's what a drive, eh?
Down to Cathcart, Hogsback, and back again along the coast is a must do for old girls. You'll love it.
That's our version of Route 66, Dylan. It's definitely a must do. It's it's beautiful. The Eastern Cape, I'll tell you what, bro, the Eastern Cape is a stunning place. PE is a beautiful city. It's really underrated, and I think we're going to see a lot of influx of people there. George, Knysna, Plet, all these smaller sort of towns, definitely going to start seeing an influx of people. Anyway, moving on. D-Dog. Sorry.
Yeah, also good. So, touching on sort of the article we read a while ago, a lot of the reasons, why people want to move is because of the crime. People saying, "Y'all, I want my kids to be able to walk to school and all that stuff." Well, they can do that, just not in the cities, basically. So, a lot of the so for crime, for instance, violent crime, generally speaking, is a little bit less of a concern in some of these rural areas. Better standards of living in terms of there's something about living in a city that people still aren't quite accustomed for. In a city, you'd think, oh, sweet, I get to meet all kinds of great people and whatnot. But usually what ends up happening is people just they're a little overwhelmed and they just stay in their little box and don't go outside of it too much. And that's kind of that's what happened to me anyways. So, and I've heard this sort of thing. It's anecdotal, but I think there's some research that bears this out, that people are a bit more atomized in the city. There's less there's less change you can affect in your own life and the world around you, just because it's a little overwhelming. And everything's so top heavy. So in order to get anything done, you need a ton of money, and then it's just complicated. So crime is one thing that's a little better. You can you don't feel, typically people aren't as atomized as they are within a smaller town. Better future for kids. Well, look, depending on, so if you're thinking economically, perhaps not, but in terms of having, one hell of a childhood, being able to go to walk around kids and enjoy life, yeah, sure, that'd be a great place to grow up. Political instability, that still affects you to some degree, although less, because of, like we were talking about with the massive service protests and the potential for just chaos when the grant spigot gets turned off eventually. That will affect you significantly less if you're out in the countryside.
Yeah. Dylan, can I just talk about something specifically while you're on the political downside of living in a small town and stuff? So what you generally see happen in the small towns, and that's what happened in that article that I read. I'll actually post the link down. It's an article about a town in the Eastern Cape called Craddock. And the lady that, I believe it was a lady, wrote the article. They live in Craddock, and they're basically telling you about, in the article, about all the service and delivery mishaps, and, well, I call them mishaps, absolute utter stuff-ups, pretty much, that the government failed to provide. And that's generally in most small towns in South Africa. That's generally what you will find, is sort of rampant incompetence when it comes to your municipal services and that sort of thing. I mean, I'm talking super incompetence when it comes to that sort of thing. So those services generally crash, And what happened in this town in Craddock is the Oaks just got gutful, and they said, listen, we're done here, because their power, their electricity went off all the time. Their water, they had no water, running water for days, sometimes weeks on end. Their sewerage was just an absolute stuff up. So they said, look, we're going to come together as a community and start a community forum. And that's exactly what they did. And they started sort of fixing the problems bit by bit by bit. And then eventually, after fairly quickly, actually, surprisingly, is what the community realized, is fairly quickly things started sort of putting themselves together. So they would have like people filling potholes in the roads, people digging canals for water, people building off the grid things like there's solar panels, that sort of thing, creating that sort of infrastructure so that people can have some sort of electricity and power and that sort of thing. And they what they realized as a community is that the sort of spontaneous order that occurred when they started that forum was substantially better than I think even what they thought it would work out as. So it's almost and again, this I might be wrong over here, but it's almost like you want these services to crash and collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the thing is, at the municipal level, like I was saying earlier, these services are a form of localized taxation because they're used to raise funds for the municipalities. And if the municipalities aren't delivering, you can legally, without being the threat of criminal charges, I mean, reorganize yourself, and it's a form of legalized tax revolt until such time as they come to the party.
Yeah, can't tax me for water if I don't buy water from you.
Correct.
Yeah. Exactly. That's brilliant. That's the ultimate anarchy over there. That's perfect anarchy. But anarchists, you know what? If you like spontaneous order and that sort of thing, what comes with that is also spontaneous hierarchy. Okay. Just
yeah. Oh, totally. But what you're talking about in terms of community involvement and stuff, I feel like that. So, and just sort of my own kind of experience, kind of being out in smaller towns and stuff like Feltriff and places like that, is people, they tend to sort of look out for themselves a bit more because, I mean, there's not these big government departments and things, and the infrastructure is pretty scant to begin with. So, people feel more inclined to do something about it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the psychology of being in a smaller environment and knowing the people who are around you and being able to sort of feel like, hey, I can go talk to, Kuis and we can fix these potholes or whatever. So, whereas here, you just sort of stay in your apartment and complain on Facebook or whatever. So
it's a real form of fraternity. It's and community and all of that you see in small towns and stuff like that. That's proper fraternity.
Yeah.
A true peer-to-peer society,
Yep.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it is. Look, in small town, myself and Russell both pretty much grew up in a small town. I mean, I'm talking super small. I mean,
you would think you pretty much, seeing as we're brothers,
I don't. Yeah, no, man. But we did. I mean, what I meant by that is we did live in other places other than this.
Yeah.
That's what I meant by it. But Dylan, I don't know how small your town in Alaska was. What was the population of your town?
When I left, it was about 10,000, but growing up, it was under that.
So it's more or less a similar sort of environment, sort of similar sort of vibe to where we grew up and stuff. But it was lekker. I mean, I won't deny it was really lekker, But the problem is, small town South Africa, especially when I finished school and Russell finished school and all of that, small town South Africa was dying. They were
80s onwards, it was dying.
So it by the time I finished school, small town South Africa pretty much had zero prospects for for anyone, you know, unless you kind of taught at the school like my mom did and that sort of thing. It's the prospects and stuff, and the future was very, very dim for small town.
A farmer's kid and loved farming.
Yeah, and then you could take over the farm and all that sort of thing. But that, you know, myself and Russell weren't farmers and stuff, so we had to, you know, leave the city, you know. And I don't regret it. I think it was great. You know, I learned a lot coming to the city. It claps you right very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, look, if what South Africa needs to do is we need to try and create the environment in small towns, because it's definitely, there's no doubt it's a healthier environment for the family in a small town than it is in a city. In my opinion, I mean, am I wrong saying that?
No, I definitely think you're right. Right now, I'm looking at having my first kid, and I don't want to be. I mean, I live right downtown, basically, and I don't want to be here. You know, when they're born.
Sure. No, you can't. No,
it's not going to be any.
You can move out to the burbs with me, D-Dog, and then we can braai every weekend.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think Dylan's looking at there are some amazing small towns around Cape Town and the Boland and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There are some amazing small places still, which would be pretty cool, I think.
And I mean, Dylan, you can be a prominent YouTuber from there as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just need internet. I'm good.
Yeah. You can do it from a cabin in the woods as well.
Oh, I've done that before.
Yeah, you legitimately have. So,
it's just anecdotal, but yeah, I remember when I was just the tangent, speaking about doing a cabin in the woods, I was literally at a cabin in the woods on an island, and I was teaching. Like I was still working for this other company at the time, and I just like woke up and I'm like, all right, cool, and just do. I'm like, with the blessings of the internet, here I am, you know.
Sure, and that's pretty much if you squash that whole story down short, that's pretty much how Dylan ended up in South Africa as well.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Very cool. So moving on, I kind of lost my train of thought when we were talking about. I see over here you've noted you've listed the sort of benefits of immigrating, or the reasons for sort of semigrating, Dylan. And I see over here there's one thing is less traffic.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one.
Far less gangsterism to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Less traffic, less gangsterism. See a little less tick-uppers running around all over the place.
The tick-upper. But what we, you know, just to, there's some organizations in South Africa that are actually working on some sort of plan with regards to, you know, forming small sort of enclaves. I know that AfriForum has their Ankerdorpe that they're doing. So they're sort of promoting the idea of sort of small towns. You know, I think like we've discussed this before. I'm pretty sure that AfriForum wants to, you know, create their own little, lack of a better word, Volksstad. You know, but that's great. I support that 100%. I should. But again, it's not. I mean, we were talking about this on the podcast with Christoph as well, where, you know, the ideal situation in South Africa would be enclaves. And this is something that we spoke about ages ago, Dylan, when I first met you on the Renegade Report Facebook group, where Oaks was saying that the history of South Africa is enclaves. And I still believe that 2 years down the line, I still believe that the history of South Africa lies in enclaves.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that's kind of the future. And, on a if you're like a big, multinational corporation, you just kind of have to deal with some of these economic tides that turn and stuff. But if you're able to sort of insulate yourself to a certain degree, you have kind of not a huge, but sort of a local economy that's kind of incestuous, sort of deals, within a lot of business done internally. Yeah. I almost said interior, then I tried to say interiorly. I'm like, that's not a word. But a lot of business done internally, then, it's a bit more robust and able to avoid some of these problems, particularly if you have alternate ways to hold value aside from a ever depreciating rand. So whether you're burying Kruger rands in the backyard or Bitcoin or whatever it is, those are, decent stores of value potentially. Bitcoin's probably a little bit volatile to be anything other than maybe what would you call it, like a speculative instrument. But maybe long-term potential, that could be an option as well.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. I think what we need to do is we need to start looking at things that the government has control of in your day-to-day life. So things like the supply of fuel, the supply of electricity, the supply of running water, supply of sewage, taxation, all of these things that the government has, that the government controls, that are part of your day-to-day life. If we can, or if you as a community can totally sort of cut yourself off from those, then the government doesn't control you anymore. Guess what?
Yeah.
The government's got no control over you, and you can do your own thing.
Yeah. No, and to a certain extent, if you just sort of keep your head down and don't openly cause trouble for them, they're more than likely to leave you alone, at least to a certain point. You certainly don't give them many excuses to get on your case at that point.
No.
Well, then what you do is while they're leaving you alone, and while you have a good sort of relationship, and they're quiet and they just leave you alone, while you do that, you secretly build up an army.
Just warehousing crates of AKs and FAL.
Yeah. Not for, I mean, look, sticking to the non-aggression principles, strictly for defense.
Strictly for defense, yes.
That's exactly it. So there won't be any sort of
uprising.
There won't be some sort of national socialism expansion out of our pantheon, to take over Africa. There won't be anything of that. There will be.
There won't be a National Socialist Workers' Party either.
Yeah. Yeah. Christian Party.
Neo-colonialism. Yeah.
Neo-colonialism. Neo-reactionaries. Ugh.
Yeah. Neo-reactionary colonialism. Now there's just all kinds of acronyms we could tack on. But yeah, so it's the whole living the country thing. There's all these things you need to consider in terms of, like you're saying, practically speaking, in terms of money and whatnot. It's a sacrifice. You're right. There are less opportunities in smaller communities, but if you're in a position where you're able to work from distance, or if you're able to move what you're doing and just sort of scale it down, it might be worth the trade-off depending on individuals' given set of circumstances.
Yeah, I think there needs to be I think about this often, like what would happen if I had to move to a small town with my family and stuff. But there's a fine balance and stuff, because I remember when Mpiake was on the show, he said that, and I agreed with him 100%. I don't think that you're ever happier than when you're working and providing for your family.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a situation where I move to a small town, and perhaps I can't provide for my family. Perhaps, you know, it's a day-to-day serious struggle, and it's just demoralizing and stuff. Whereas I know that in the city I could go and, you know, work and, you know, give my family what they need and that sort of thing. So there has to be that sort of balance. You know, I want to be able to live in the small town and still be able to give my family everything that they need, okay, or provide for my family, because that also, from a mental perspective, in your mind as a father and the husband of or the father of the family and stuff, it works on your brain. That it works on your mind. I mean, you look at some of the oaks that sit in these small towns and sit at bars, and they've got serious bar rash, and their nose is swelled up like this from bar rash, and they're miserable. They're miserable because the small town is dying around them. They've got no drive. They've got no, you know what I mean? And there has to be some sort of, there has to be a balance where you know that you're working towards something great. You understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're moving into a sustainable situation. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why, like, small town America has that down really, really well, because you can pretty much provide for your family living in a small town in the US. In South Africa, I mean, in the 70s and stuff in South Africa, you could have the best life ever in a small town in South Africa. I mean, we were talking about when myself and Russell were growing up we lived in the Transkei for a bit, which was actually a Bantustan. And she's like, what a life. We lived an amazing life. This was sort of late 80s, early 90s. And we lived an amazing life in a small town and stuff. But now the small towns are suffering. Hopefully we'll see a renaissance in the small towns.
Yeah, I think at a certain point that may happen because because a lot of the problem I think you have right now is you have a lot of people living in them, but not necessarily the economy that's able to sustain the amount of people who are there. And which is why we're seeing continually a lot of people move from like the Eastern Cape to Cape Town. There's a reason for that. But as these places become kind of depopulated to a certain extent, then they might sort of reach an equilibrium, you know? So maybe there's a third less people living there. But, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's a better situation for the people who remain there. I'm not sure.
What we're going to need to do is what's going to have to happen is there's going to have to be decentralized industries. So things like factories, that sort of thing, that are built in these small towns that can provide employment and work and stuff for these guys. So private, industry and all of that, like Uitenhage in PE, just outside PE, used to be a small town, and people moved there because of the car factories. They had the VW factory there and everything, and it built a whole entire little small town community around the factory. And that's what we're going to have to do. That's what a lot of small town America was founded on, was decentralized industries.
Yeah, that's true. And, kind of an interesting, I met this guy in Plettenberg, like rural Plettenberg, like outside of the town, kind of in between Neisner and Plettenberg. Mm-hmm. And what his thing was is this is an Afrikaans guy and his family, and he was a mold maker by trade. And what he ended up doing is their business is they actually made, I'm trying to remember what they made. They made masks, like for masquerades, like elaborate masquerade masks. I remember how to make the masks. Yeah. And then basically what he was able to do is he sells internationally to, to clients wherever they are globally. And he also provides some local employment. Like he teaches a lot of the people in sort of the surrounding townships how to make these things. And then he pays them piece by piece for the raw molds. And then he comes back, they touch them up, and they make them and sell them for export. And they're able to live a perfectly comfortable life and provide employment opportunities to quite a few locals there as a result. So,
yeah, you see, that's perfect. That's
Yeah.
brilliant. You see, but what would generally happen with a centralized government is they would sort of incentivize that oak to move to the city.
right. Yeah, exactly.
This is the whole thing. Why do you think they do that, Russell? Do you know why?
Because it's easier that way to control a population, to issue your propaganda, to formulate the direction of the nation. It's easier for basically also big corporations like a lot of customers in one place. It's the most cost-effective way to sell goods and services. These are
Is it
all,
not?
so these are off the top of my head a few things that I can think of.
What I would think of it, especially from the ANC's perspective and stuff, is to keep rural areas poor.
Yeah, look, it doesn't really matter whether they're poor or not.
Think about it, Russell. In the urban areas in South Africa, what percentage of the vote does the ANC get?
Well, there's that as well. But I mean, the thing is, once people come to the cities, they might actually be changing their votes.
Yeah, exactly. When they come to the cities,
Possible.
oh yeah. But yeah, population-wise in South Africa,
look, like I say, I mean, the thing is, with the rate of rural areas, it's not like the Western world or North America where the rural areas have been depopulated, by people moving to the cities. In South Africa, it's the rural areas that have become overpopulated, and the surplus is moving to the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is the whole logic, but I think the ANC likes a poor rural area, because basically what I mean is, when I'm saying a centralized government, I'm not meaning only necessarily. So basically, what they've done is they've moved industry and stuff away from the rural areas. Okay, that way you keep the rural areas poor. Okay, and they're also easier to control when they're poor. And I mean, that's the only reason that I can think of. And then in the cities, it's easier to control them, I guess.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the thing is, your reasoning is definitely true. You take a country voting. Look, in South Africa, with the proportional voting system, where somebody lives doesn't really count into the thing much. I know that if you look at the electoral map of Zimbabwe, for instance, okay, but they also have an urbanizing population. But the MDC, ZANU-PF hardly wins anything in any of the three major urban areas in Zimbabwe. They hardly win anything. But all the all the electoral districts or seat districts are mostly, even though it doesn't represent the population, they've set it up in such a way that they're mostly in the rural areas. And ZANU-PF buy off the guys in the rural areas with food packs every 5 years.
Mm.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So if they think about it logically, if they had to sort of promote industry and stuff in these rural areas, those rural areas have those oaks have jobs, they have money, they can now send their children to school, they can now possibly send their children to university, those children become educated. Boom, no more useful idiots. So
yeah. No, I think you're seeing a same thing happen between Zimbabwe and South Africa, where these a lot of these poor rural populations are basically used as vote farms by the governing authority.
For sure.
So it's a sad state of affairs, and I'm not exactly sure how best to do that. Urban voters, I was interested in this recent election, how the voting trends, particularly with all the influx of people from the Eastern Cape coming to Cape Town, the voting trends for the DA actually seem to be pretty constant, and the biggest shift away from them actually came from apparently like middle class, colored and white voters. So But the people who are come here, the newer inhabitants from the Eastern Cape and stuff, they seemed to know that the status quo was better where they came from, and they voted for it instead of having party loyalty on the provincial level, at least.
100 cement.
Yeah, no, definitely. But
So, yeah, that's
there's lots of varying competing powers. I think overall people want a centralization of populations.
Yeah.
Overall, that the general move is to try and get people centralized.
Yeah.
If it means
are you saying that people want that, or government wants that?
No, the government wants it. If it means people living in 50-story apartment buildings, room cupboards, like 10 square meters type of thing, then so be it. You know what I mean? Get everybody crammed in. We need to sell goods and services over the shortest possible distance. Make as much money.
But that's what government wants. That's not what people want. So, in a nutshell, guys, should we just wrap it up and give our closing statements? D-Dog, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Bro? Yeah, sure. I'll go. I mean, in conclusion, I guess there's a lot of things to consider. So there's the economic aspect to consider. If you have a certain lifestyle that you wish to maintain, it might be hard to do that in the country. But then again, things are cheaper out there. Maybe you can afford to do with a bit less. But on the other hand, have a payout in terms of lower crime, better sense of community, no traffic or gangsters. So, it's a decision, each person has to make for himself. But even on the outskirts of Cape Town, outside of the city and kind of into the town surrounding it, like Gordons Bay or Pringle Bay and whatnot, you can have a nice life and still be fairly close to the action if you want to. So I think this is a trend we're going to see continue, and it's already happening. There's a lot of these people moving out of these big cities, and if you just look at the property markets, emigration is huge. I think semigration may be the wave of the future for those who don't have the coin to move to New Zealand or whatever, or the inclination. So, yeah, something to consider.
Yeah. Russell?
I think, look, for me, the type of career that I'm in, I have to be close to the economy. It is changing. I would be able to live or spend large parts of my time in a smaller area like, say, Gordons Bay or Pringle Bay, or one of these outlying areas. But ideally, my idea of semigration is not to be close to the action at all. Is actually to be far away, and actually be self-sufficient, and buy an abandoned town or something. That's more like kind of my.
Russell wants to go full on Unabomber.
Yeah,
man, he wants to be Bilbo Baggins.
yeah, I want to be the Unabomber. But no, look, like I said, the world is changing. It's a smaller place. You need to be dynamic in your thinking. You need to come up with innovative ideas. The technologies are making it possible. And I just encourage people to weigh up all their options and really think about it. You know what I mean? Think about it in terms of the world as it is and the way the world is going.
Right.
Yeah. So, So I agree 100%. I agree with Russell as well with regards to what actual semigration is. Look, my take on this is a little bit more philosophical. I think that people need to realize that there's a lot more to life than the grind, than the wake up in the morning, go to work, make money, raise a family. Well, a lot of the times the raising the family doesn't even happen because you're too focused on what they call life nowadays.
Shekels.
Shekels. Yeah. You're focused on the shekels, chasing the shekels. So, but what I think people are going to start realizing is that, life is all about making life. Life is all about raising a family. I'm experiencing that now. My wife's pregnant, just like Dylan's wife. and we're about to become fathers, and we're starting to think about these things, seriously. And I think that people will start realizing that there's a lot more to life than just getting a job, starting a career, and that sort of thing. So I do think that there is going to be that sort of move towards starting a life somewhere else. But I do think there's going to be, I do think it's going to happen more dramatically than just people changing location. I do think that there are going to be enclaves that are going to start and spring up out of nowhere. There probably are already a couple of enclaves in the planning somewhere in South Africa. I'm pretty sure there is. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen with regards to that. The city is not the future in my mind, and I do believe that a lot of people are going to be moving out of the cities. Anything else you guys want to add?
No, I'm done.
Good.
Hey, dog.
All good, man.
You're done. Cool. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. Remember, folks, to subscribe, like, and go and like our Facebook page. Go and check out our Twitter page for the most based reactionary stuff that you'll ever see in South African shores. D-Dog runs that page quite tightly over there. A lot of that will go on there if you're a liberal. But who cares? Screw these liberals. But anyway, thank you so much for listening, guys. Have a lovely evening. And stay reactionary out there, because
God wills it.
God wills it. Peace out.